I'm so happy to have you with us for our special circle Boundaries, How to Say No with Compassion with Loren Gelberg-Goff. I'm Roseanne Corcoran. I'm host of Daughterhood, the podcast, and a Daughterhood Circle leader. Daughterhood is a safe haven for caregivers like you to connect, gain knowledge, share experiences, and most importantly, realize that your feelings are not just normal, but also valid. We understand that the system is not set up for you, and that's why we're here, ready to support you every step of the way. It's my pleasure to welcome previous guest on the Daughterhood, the podcast, Loren Gelberg-Goff. Loren is the go-to professional on caregiver issues. She's counseled thousands of caregivers in her work in hospitals, hospices, and her private practice in setting healthier boundaries, overcoming guilt, and even reconnecting to compassion in the midst of the never-ending demands of caregiving. Her most recent book, Take Back Your Life, The Caregiver's Guide to Finding Freedom in the Midst of Overwhelm, is available digitally, print, and audio. Her virtual group program for caregivers, rescuers, and fixers provides guidance, support, and encouragement to take as good care of themselves as they do of those they love. So we welcome Loren Gelberg-Goff.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. And this topic is certainly one that's near and dear to my heart because it's something we have to face every day, all the time. And for most of us who grew up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, boundaries were not something that were really taught to girls growing up. It was always about taking care of everybody else. And so we've sort of learned historically that setting boundaries was selfishness and making it about us instead of making it about taking care of everybody else. Nobody's feelings should be hurt. So let's start with a clear definition of boundaries. A boundary is anything that marks a limit. A psychological boundary defines personal dignity. And the goal is to set healthy boundaries from a place of love and compassion, not fear or anger. And very often, the only time we start setting boundaries is when we've had it up to here and we can't take anymore. And so we blurt something out and then we kind of retract because it doesn't feel good, we came at it from a challenging place. So today is really about redefining and reevaluating where boundaries come from and how to set them. And again, yes, it is about being able to, in many circumstances, say no with compassion. So when we don't set boundaries, and Roseanne sent out the handout, we all know when a boundary has been crossed, whether it's been physical, mental, or emotional boundary. Somebody's yelling at you, somebody's invading your space. We know if you've ever been at a party and somebody comes too close, we know when our physical space has been invaded. We back up, we put a hand up, we move aside, we do something. So I want you to start to become aware of the emotional state that you go into when you sense that something is wrong, that a boundary has been ignored, violated, dismissed. Physically, what do you feel? Does your stomach get into a knot? Do you get a headache? I know for a long time when I would feel invaded or overwhelmed, I would get exhausted immediately. Like I immediately had to take a nap. Mentally, I would feel myself shut down. How many of you have ever experienced that sense of you literally can feel like your brain froze? Like, nope. And there was a preschool teacher who said there was a little 3-year-old when it was nap time and she didn't want to take a nap, and she put her hands on her hips and said, "Don't tell me what I don't want to hear." And that's like such a clear statement of, wait a minute, stop. And it doesn't mean that someone is asking for something wrong or inappropriate or anything else. That's why you have to understand boundaries are for you. It's a way in which we learn to take care of ourselves. So if we keep going along with whatever it is our loved ones want or demands that are being made, we just say yes to acquiesce, to keep the peace. How does that feel? And this is something you can write down, because the reality is that in many situations, someone will feel sad, hurt, deprived, upset. It doesn't always have to be you. And when we are so used to being the one who takes the hit, we twist ourselves into pretzels just to keep the peace, just to make things work, so our loved ones won't feel deprived. So I want you to understand that you choose the behavior, you choose the consequence. And there will always be a consequence, one you're either used to, or after today, one you're willing to experience in a different way. So setting boundaries, we want to start small steps. If you're always taking a phone call, can you even, for 5 minutes, let a call go to voicemail, even if you're going to call back right away? Can you let it go to voicemail once? So it's understanding, and people have said to me, "Oh, my mother, my loved one, my husband, whoever it is, calls me 100 times a day, demanding something, ringing me from the other room." How do you feel? The first step in setting new boundaries is being self-aware. Okay? If there's something we want, we need, we're looking for, we have to start with admitting it to ourselves. So the first question I ask on the handout, and it is by far and away my favorite question in almost any situation: what's my desired outcome? Now, desired outcome has to fit 2 requirements. Number 1, it has to be what you want, not what you don't want. Because whatever we put our attention to gets bigger. So people have said to me, "Well, I just don't want to argue with my loved one. I don't want to have a fight." Well, that's what you don't want. And so your attention is now going to the fight. And our psyches, don't understand the negative. All our psyches hear is fight. So let's take a breath and say, well, what do I want? Well, I want my loved one to stop calling me. Well, the second rule for a desired outcome is that it has to be something over which we have control. And we do not have control over whether someone will call us 100 times a day or not. And so we teach people how we are willing to be treated. And if we are answering every call, running at the drop of a hat, they are learning that that's okay. We are teaching them that that's okay for us. And so when we make a change, yeah, there will be some pushback. And it's what, again, I go back to choose the behavior, choose the consequence. And in making any change, there's always an adjustment period. Okay, so what's my desired outcome? I want ease. I want peace. I want serenity. I want time off. I try very hard not to use the phrase, I want a break, because I don't want to break anything. I want time off. I want time out. I want alone time. I want time with friends. What defines for you what you want? And in using regular language, what has a break meant to you? Is it an hour off? Is it a weekend? Is it a vacation? And if people aren't around who you would expect to help, we have to look outside the box. People get disappointed. Oh, my siblings don't help. My relatives are not around. They're not willing to do anything. So it leaves me. It's just me. My loved one only wants my help. We hear all these phrases and buy into them. And so another message to keep in mind, don't believe everything you think. For millennia, people believed the world was flat. They lived their lives as if the world was flat. They would fall off the edge. Just because they believed it didn't make it true. And all too often, we believe what I refer to as lies masquerading as truth. We believe them, and we haven't yet been skeptical enough to challenge or question them. And so boundaries are for you. And as I said in the definition, they are a sign of personal respect. Do you believe you matter? Because we tend to forget that we do, because everything seems to be about our loved one. There are lots of support services for patients, air quotes. There are doctors, there are physical therapists, occupational therapists, there are all kinds of ancillary services that are geared for the care and comfort at all different levels, some better than others, for our loved one. And we fall into the background, and what about me? So you know that you need to set new boundaries if you're constantly feeling overwhelmed. You frequently get sick or feel sick, have chronic sinus infections, colds, physical challenges. Are you the person who says yes to everything and then constantly feel exhausted? Do people regularly invade your physical, emotional space that you feel uncomfortable, or think you're really not safe to say no? That they'll be angry, they'll be upset, they'll be hurt. Do you ignore fear of speaking up? Do you believe people are asking too much of you and you're having trouble saying no, setting a new boundary? So let's talk about what it means to set a new boundary. Think about what you do currently when you feel any of those things I just listed: invaded, overwhelmed, put upon, resentful. And if they've all become a habit, we start to wonder, well, how did this habit get started? Do I only feel good when I'm helping others? Is that how you've learned to define yourself? And I asked the question in our Take Back Your Life group and on the Facebook group, when did you become a caregiver? And so many people responded with, like, all my life. They started when they were children, taking care of either younger siblings or taking care of a parent who wasn't well for whatever reason. Did you become a caregiver like overnight? There was a crisis of some sort. Or did it happen gradually? Somebody's wellness declined, somebody's health needs increase. Because we tend to slide into this role of caregiver without really thinking about it. It just sort of happens. So I want to read a quote to you because I think that it's really makes it very clear why we tend not to set boundaries. When we begin to set boundaries with people we love, a really hard thing happens. They hurt. They may feel a hole where you used to plug up their aloneness, their disorganization, or their financial irresponsibility. Whatever it is, they will feel a loss. If you love them, this will be difficult for you to watch. But when you are dealing with someone who is hurting, remember that your boundaries are both necessary for you and helpful for them. If you have been enabling them to be irresponsible, your limit setting may nudge them toward responsibility. So while a loved one who's physically or cognitively impaired, and we can't fully expect them to step up and honor our boundaries, it's whether or not we're willing to respect our needs and our feelings to ask for help from the outside, whatever it might be. It's based on your desired outcome. Do you want an hour off? Do you want time to go to the grocery store at leisure instead of always ordering in? Do you want a weekend away? And when we have a strong enough desire for something, we can and will make a change, make a plan, okay? Because when we fail to set boundaries and hold other people accountable, we feel used and mistreated. And this is why we sometimes attack who they are. And that's far more hurtful than addressing a behavior or a choice. So somebody had said she has trouble setting boundaries because her husband always finds a loophole. And then she follows it up with, well, and he has early signs of dementia. And so she gets angry with him for not honoring her boundaries. And that becomes this vicious cycle. When we look out and point a finger and blame, we're really not looking at, okay, what do I need to do to take care of myself in the face of these circumstances? And we as caregivers need to set limits because takers rarely do. As I said before, we teach them how we're willing to be treated. When my husband was, he had a number of issues that caused him to be disabled. And I would go to, and this was a number of years ago, I would go to the grocery store every Thursday morning at 7 a.m. And by the time I came home, I had zero expectation of his being able to help me if he was still in the bedroom. I didn't know if he was still sleeping. I didn't know what was going on, but he wasn't out there to provide help. I had zero expectation, not a problem, got everything put away. But there were days when I would come in and he'd be sitting in the living room and I'd be schlepping things in, getting stuff put away. And I found myself feeling really angry, resentful, frustrated. And I had to say to him, hey, you're in the bedroom, I have no problem. But if you're out here, you can get up and help. Whether it's I'll bring stuff in and you put it away, but I had to be willing to speak up, because otherwise you feel like you're being a martyr. And I can tell you historically, there has never been a happy martyr. So we don't want to go down that road. So it's a matter of speaking up. What's my desired outcome? I would like help. I have no control over whether someone is willing to help, but if I don't ask, the answer is always no. So it's allowing myself to ask. If the answer is no, then we have a different kind of conversation. How come? What are some options? And then we get to explore other possibilities. But if I don't ask, the answer is always no. And I can tell you that the times that he was out in the living room, he did help. And it created greater ease, because he then felt like he was participating in a way that didn't reinforce all the losses that he had been experiencing over the years. So it does help them when they can to do what they can. So we all know the phrase, love your neighbor as yourself. Nowhere does it say love your neighbor more than yourself. Do you matter? And one of the biggest things we as caregivers have to learn is that we matter. If historically you've been there for all your friends, family, loved ones, and it just hasn't occurred to you that people should be here for you too, could be here for you too, it's a learning curve. And initially, yes, it will feel uncomfortable. But if we don't love with boundaries, and that doesn't mean we don't love unconditionally. You can love someone unconditionally. That doesn't mean you don't have boundaries, because you get to love yourself unconditionally as well. And healthy boundaries allow us to test reality rather than rely on fairy tale fantasy, because when problems are present, struggles, stresses, when they show up, if we can honor our needs and feelings as much as we honor someone else's, then we can change how we communicate. We're not just being a martyr. We're not just giving in to keep the peace. Because peace at any price is not peace. And if you're the one who's used to always taking the hit, handling everything, what are we teaching other people? And what are they learning from us? And my husband became disabled when my daughter was 10 and my son was 3. So what was I teaching them about care, self-respect? And, I share the story in my book about after Hurricane Floyd, My daughter desperately wanted to go to her friend who lived about 2 miles away. And I was like, oh, that's nuts. It's crazy out there. And she goes, oh, come on, she begged. And of course, she was 13 at the time. So I was having all those feelings about her dad can't really participate so much. I didn't want her to feel bad. So I said, okay, against my better judgment, because I didn't want her to feel disappointed. And as we're driving around, fallen trees, debris in the streets, I looked at her and I said, this is nuts. This is really stupid. We really shouldn't be doing this. And she looked at me straight as an arrow and said, well, you could have said no. And yeah, but there was that learning moment, that learning opportunity, what I refer to as pop quiz. And a pop quiz, we all remember them from school. You walk into the classroom and the teacher says, okay, books away, pens out, we're having a pop quiz. And you feel that sense of panic. Did I do the reading? What's it on? Oh my God. So in school, you get the lesson and then you get the pop quiz. In life, we get the pop quiz and then the lesson if we're open to learning. So saying no, yeah, would my daughter have been upset? Yes. Will your loved one initially be upset if they're not getting what they want when they want it, how they want it? Yes. 3 words, and it's not sarcasm. And so what? And it's not a sarcastic question. It's and so what? What's going to happen? Let's play it out. Let's address what that fear is that you might be experiencing in saying no, in saying, that doesn't work for me. And so when we hear a request, a demand, and I am not talking about an emergency. We all know the difference between an emergency and a request or a demand. So the first thing I want you to do is take a breath. Just slow, deep breath in through your nose and exhale slowly through your mouth. Repeat back what you've heard. What is it that they're asking for? One woman's mother, who was in a long-term care facility, used to call her hysterical. I need an sundry of things. And they were never an emergency need, like you got to go pick up my medication or something. No. And she would always drop everything and run, never challenging the discomfort she would feel in her gut, or the headache she would get, or what she would do to get friends to pick up her kids from school. She would just run. And when she finally started, just a few steps, take a breath. Repeat back what you heard. I hear you need X, Y, Z. Did I hear you correctly? Let your loved one repeat back what they want. Validate their feeling, their need, desire for something. Okay? Validate it. You're not validating the time frame necessarily, but you are validating, I understand how important this is. Now, you start to take yourself into consideration. What's on my agenda today? What was I doing? And not judging that it was no big deal. One woman chose to go into work when she got called in. She's a nurse, and she chose to go in when she got called after she had been on for 3 straight days and was exhausted, and she couldn't wait to go into her garden and just do some weeding and just get back in touch with nature. But she judged it as, I'm not doing anything important. So she went into work exhausted, frustrated, angry, and was not in a very good mood that day at work. Didn't feel good, didn't sound good, didn't look good. So when we replay it and say, okay, so let's talk about what would have happened if you had said, so I'm coming into work today, or running to the nursing home, or running to the store for you right now doesn't work for me right now. I can do this for you tomorrow or over the weekend. And if your loved one is really insistent, say, well, you know what? Aunt Mary lives down the street. I can call her. No, I don't want you. Don't ask her. Don't bother her. You can do this. We go back through the steps. Take a breath. Repeat back what you heard. Oh, you don't want me to bother Aunt Mary. Okay, I understand. I can do this for you then on Saturday. Remember, choose the behavior, choose the consequence. Someone is going to be upset, frustrated, annoyed. It doesn't always have to be you. And then it comes down to, are you willing to ask Aunt Mary or the next door neighbor or someone, use Instacart or Amazon to get something delivered that needs to be delivered? We have options. And it's changing a pattern that we're just so used to that we don't think of those options. So as hard as it may be for our loved ones to need help, whether they're newly disabled or newly physically compromised, certainly if they have cognitive impairments and can't fully process anything, it's more important that you emotionally are taking care of yourself so you can feel more compassion for your loved one. So if you're going to be respectful and care for a loved one with compassion, we have to be caring for ourselves. For any of us who have ever been on an airplane, we know they say if there should be an emergency and oxygen is required, and the masks drop down and you're traveling with a dependent, place the mask over your face first. And I know that initially that sounds really counterintuitive because, oh my God, no, I have to take care of my kids. I have to take care of my loved one. And we breathe, because the truth of the matter is, if you're not breathing, your loved ones won't either. And at 30,000 feet, it's a definite physiological reality. Down on Earth, if we're not really taking care of ourselves, we cannot take long-term loving care of our loved ones. And when I've asked people, well, when did you become caregiver? And people have said, all my life, or, my loved one had a heart attack or a stroke and it just was chaos. Okay, so we get through the crisis. And now what? What's my desired outcome? And how do I feel making these changes? Do you matter? Are you willing to take different steps, to take as good care of yourself as you do of the people in your life? And the people in your life are not always just necessarily your loved one who's who's disabled or sick, but how many people call you because they know you look like you got it all together. Nobody knows what you need to help unless we ask. And again, from even knowing all that I knew when I started on this journey, as Roseanne said, I started in hospitals, hospices. I worked in clinics with multiply handicapped children and their families. And I thought, I've got this when my husband became disabled. I've got this. And it never occurred to me about being able to ask for help, because look at all the praise and recognition you have gotten or may have gotten over the years for what an amazing job you do. Oh, you're so remarkable. And initially, some of those, quote, compliments can feel good. You know, I never needed help with my homework growing up. My sisters always wanted drama and got help growing, with homework. I got praised for not asking for help. So I thought asking for help was not necessary. I didn't need to ask for help. So how many of you have had that experience? I don't need to ask for help. I got this. No matter how exhausted you are, you got this. And so people don't know you need or want help unless we ask. And as Mr. Rogers so aptly stated, when there's a problem, when there's a disaster, when there's an issue, there are helpers. There are always helpers. But they don't pop up out of the blue. We sometimes really do have to look for them. And sometimes the people you expect to be the helpers are not the ones who show up. In the last few years, with everything that I had gone through with my husband and my son, it was different people who showed up, different people who came through in different ways, other than the people I would have expected. So, given that, in setting boundaries, it comes back to, am I willing to take care of myself? Do I matter? So if you look at the handout and you look at, okay, what do I usually do if I feel like my boundaries are being ignored, or maybe not even somebody's not even aware of them? Because again, kind of going off track for a minute, nothing is ever personal. Somebody making a demand of you is not about you. It's about them. What I want, what I need, what I'm feeling right now, that you are going to take care of. I'm not thinking about you. So are you willing? What is it that you normally do in giving in to somebody's demand or request? And how does that feel? What would you like to do instead? If you could fantasize for a moment, what would you want to do instead? Okay? Fantasize. Wait till next week, call somebody else. What would you want to do? So if there's something you want to do, what would you need to be able to do that? Because remember, the boundaries are a sign of your self-respect. It's not about pushing somebody away. It's about empowering you. I use the example sometimes, you go into the bathroom, you close the door. We may think it's to keep somebody out, but in truth, it's to give you privacy. a radio announcer had once asked, if you live alone, do you still close the door when you go to the bathroom? And apparently on whatever survey he took, it was like an astronomical number of people who said yes. So clearly, it wasn't about keeping somebody out. It's about, oh no, this feels good. I can close the door. It's private. Are you allowed? Do you give yourself permission to take care of yourself? So that's where that starts. So what would you need going forward that would show respect for your boundaries? Just jot it down. Start to pay attention. Like I said at the beginning, the only way we start to set boundaries is if we are aware. And maybe today's conversation can increase your awareness of that discomfort to warrant making a change. Because oftentimes we don't make changes unless there is a sense of urgency. I do a virtual support group called Take Back Your Life. And it's over the years, I've been doing it for 10 years now. And over the years, people have stayed in the group, even when they are no longer providing care for someone, because it keeps them focused on what self-care really means. So in that regard, like, okay, what is that sense of urgency that brings us to a place of saying, I need something? Because some part of you is aware something isn't working. You're not feeling good. And loving and caring for someone can feel really good. We can feel really good about what we're doing, what we're taking care of, how we're handling things. And then we have to become aware of when something doesn't feel good. And that lets you know, oh, a boundary's been crossed. Even if I've crossed it myself, that I agreed to something that I really didn't want to agree to. How many times have we said yes? And you know the expression, if you're saying yes to someone else, are you saying no to yourself? And how does that feel? So boundaries are really not meant to punish yourself or someone else, but they are for your well-being and protection. And so they come out better and more effectively when we are assertive, calm, courteous, assertive, firm, clear, not angry or resentful. So, I know it's on the handout, number 7, and this is so clearly important. And I tell this to people all the time, do not explain, defend, or justify. This goes back to the steps we were talking about. If a demand has been made and you breathe, you repeat back what you heard, you validate your loved one's feelings for wanting whatever it is they've asked for. You let them know, I can do this on this day. Do not explain, defend, or justify why, because that only opens you up to an argument. Like the woman who went to work because all she was going to do, and this was her own argument to herself, was garden. It wasn't a demand, another job or a responsibility, a doctor's appointment. She didn't have what she deemed a good reason. And I'm sure, we've all grown up with being asked the question, well, why didn't you do your homework? Why didn't you get that job done? And it brings up that feeling of childhood of, I better have a good answer. A good answer for whom? You are enough. It's okay for you to say no. And if you do not explain, defend, or justify, you are not giving the other person something to argue about. You breathe. So you say, I can take care of this for you on Saturday or next week, or I can order it for you and it'll be delivered. And we breathe. Allow the silence to be there. If there is an argument or you anticipate an argument happening, say thank you. Thank you for understanding that I can't take care of this for you right away. Now, your loved one may not really understand, may argue, no, I don't, that's not right. Say, I understand how hard it is, right? It's hard not to get our needs met right away. I get it. Stick with the feelings, not the words. It is frustrating. We've all experienced it when we're not getting what we need or want, when we need or want it. Validate the feelings. I understand how frustrating it is. And if it's going to escalate, say, I love you. If you're in the same room, I'll be right back. I'm going to go get a drink of water. I'm going to the bathroom. If you're on the phone, say, let me call you right back. We can change the energy of the moment. So you can spend a few minutes taking a breath, taking care of yourself, acknowledging this step is challenging. That's why I say start small. Depending on how overwhelming things feel or seem, start small. Maybe you won't take that next phone call. You'll call back in 5 minutes. We breathe. Let's allow that moment to let the tension, the uncertainty, the fear dissipate. This is about learning. Go back to what I said earlier. Choose the behavior, choose the consequence. And if you relent and give in, I remember that commercial from decades ago for V8. They smack themselves in the head and say, I could have had a V8. So you hit yourself on the forehead and say, AFGO, AFGO, another freaking growth opportunity. Pop quiz. There we go. So you're learning. Start small. Be willing to practice. 3 P's going forward. Practice, patience, and perseverance. Don't beat yourself up when you do the same thing, give in because you don't want to have an argument. Okay. Forgiveness. We talk a lot about how we need to have greater compassion for ourselves, greater understanding for the journey we are on, so that we can continue to provide loving care in whatever way it is when we're taking better care of ourselves. And I can give you the links to get information about the group that I do. For anybody who wants more information about it, you can go to tbylgroup.com. It's just a whole host of information there that you might find helpful, so that you can learn more about how to take as good care of yourself as you do of those you love. I don't want to run out of time. I want to give people a chance. If you have a question or a concern that you'd like to address, we have a few minutes. Oh, good for you. Deborah wrote, she let her mother's call go to voicemail. And we breathe. And while the title of my book is Take Back Your Life, a friend of mine had said it should be called And We Breathe, because that is what I say all the time. And taking that breath is what moves us from reactivity to responsiveness. We become more conscious of what our desired outcome is so that we can think more clearly. That momentary can dissipate.
Loren, there's so many great points here. I mean, do I matter? Well, yeah, that that alone, the pop quiz. I mean, uh, we're usually the ones that take the hit, and we are,
Mm-hmm.
and it's because like the woman that went to work. Well, I was only doing this, yeah, but it was still something you wanted to do.
Right.
It's so important
Right.
to remember that.
And that's why we don't explain, defend, or justify.
Right.
When I did a program with a financial planner who did a retirement boot camp for baby boomers. And here they were talking about possibly retiring. And, oh, if I don't have the guardrails of a job, and now maybe my kids are asking me to babysit, maybe my parents are needing more help, and now I don't have a job that is going to tell me I can't go, I have to work.
Right.
Don't explain, defend, or justify. The line that works best is, that doesn't work for me today or that day. It doesn't work for me. It opens up to other possibilities. If you want to put the tbylgroup.com, that can give you more information about the group that I do.
Yeah.
Because historically, if we're all in our 50s, 60s, 70s going forward, what did you learn? What did you learn about yourself? A woman had told me years ago, when she was in first grade, so that's how far back it went.
Wow.
Her family was going to Disney. And she came home and said, oh, I told whoever about going to Disney. And her mother said, oh, you shouldn't have done that. She might feel bad that they're not going.
Oh, jeez.
So this woman learned, I can't tell anybody anything good that I'm doing because somebody's going to feel bad.
Yeah. Yep.
Claire, did you want to ask a question?
I did. My experience with saying no is not very good, and and it's not that anybody ever asked me to do things. I just like charged up the hill, and so in my family, I am the person, which was fine, and it worked out well until people didn't like what I was doing, mm-hmm. and they wanted something more done or something different done. And if I didn't acquiesce, what I got was really the ad hominem attacks of, oh, there must be something wrong with you that you want to do it this way. You must get some high from mother needing you so much, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And then kind of a questioning whether or not my underlying intentions were even good. Or was I just doing what I was doing for a power trip, So it's not about the person who's on the receiving end of the care. It's really about the siblings.
Okay.
How do I set boundaries with them so I'm not the doormat?
Good question. So primarily it's going to be what I said before, nothing anybody says is about you. Caregivers are often accused of just doing it to be in control and to do things their way. Mm-hmm. And it's, oh, I hear how upset you are. I hear how concerned you are. What would you like to do to help? And most times, if people are being that critical, they really don't want to help. They just want to point a finger. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's, and you may not really want that person's help because of whatever the challenges are in that relationship. Right. But it's saying, I hear your concerns. What is it that you would like to do? because otherwise we're just dealing with people who are what we call you should. You should do this. You should do that.
Yeah.
And when we are not taking their comments personally, because it's not about you, you're the only, you're coming from a loving, caring place. It's been your job forever. Oh, did you want to step up and do something? Let's talk about it.
No.
Yeah,
no,
I'd like to go. Go ahead.
I never really got that of this is what I'll do because I think it should be done. Or I don't think I ever got to the point where I said, how can you help? I did get to the point in a conversation about 5 years ago where I said that the hardest part of taking care of mother was them, and kind of when those words came out of my mouth, I never really got any other, I never got any offers and any asks that I made, very minor asks, were not satisfied. I mean, something simple like we moved my mother to assisted living and my mother wanted pictures, like you see pictures in my background. She wanted family pictures back up. And so I asked everybody for family pictures, and this person wouldn't give me any of her family, So that kind of stuff. So I think I've gotten better at saying no. And there's a wonderful saying. I have a little book of sayings that I write down to help me with this stuff. And one of them is when respect is no longer served, it's time to leave the table. Mm-hmm. And so I pretty much left the table with this one particular person. I just left it. And, I thought you're staying there and you're still serving your disrespect. I've left. And that's kind of what
that's awesome. I love that expression. I love that. Mm-hmm. And
all right, thank you.
Then you will know when because the question on the handout is, how do you know when a boundary's been crossed? And so when I'm not feeling respect, it's not about them. You're doing this for you. And they may be upset, hurt, frustrated that you've left the table, but it's not about them. So, yeah.
Love that. I love that. That's great. Anyone else have any questions for Loren before we wrap up? Loren, it was great.
No.
So many
Thank
great nuggets, so many great things to focus on. Top to bottom, I just kept, taking notes.
Well, I'm happy to do this again. I love this. So thank you.
You are more than welcome to come back anytime. As always, everybody, you can find us at daughterhood.org. You can find Loren at her group, tbylgroup.com.
Right.
You can find Loren. As always, you can find us at daughterhood.org, our calendar, our circles, the podcast, sign up for our newsletter for updates. And thanks for joining us. And Loren, thank you. Can't thank you enough. You are a gift to us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.